Now, looking at the January 8 statement from the ANC, we're joined by the party's national chairperson, Gwede Mantashe. He is in studio with me, and on Zoom, we're joined by political analyst Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana. He's with the University of Johannesburg. Gentlemen, my thanks to you both for making time to speak to you. Let's start with you, chairperson in studio here. South Africa is a participant in 4 vaccine trials, some of which have taken place in our country. Why should South Africans accept the excuses that have been put forward, justifying the delay in delivering these vaccines?
Though it's not my area of speciality, but I must make the point that I don't know what delay are you talking about. Dr. Keys has explained that the first amount of vaccine will come in January. If you say it should have been here in December or in November, then you are talking delay, you are correct. Very few countries had access to the vaccine in December and November. January and February, the first amount will be here. That is the effort that has been put to ensure that South African access vaccine. And we should continue supporting one another in ensuring that all South Africans ultimately get access to the vaccine.
Yes. You dispute the word delay that I use. Some reports today suggest exactly what I'm saying, that there clearly is a scramble now to get this COVID-19 vaccine into the country as soon as possible. At some point, we were told it's going to be at the second quarter of 2021. Now things have moved up slightly. It's now going to be the end of January. That talks to a scramble, chairperson.
I don't know a scramble. You see, when there is, resources, when they are limited, there is always a scramble for those resources because everybody rushes for those resources. The fact that we are part of that scramble in itself is positive. We should continue scrambling to access the vaccine for our people. And to me, we need to support that instead of pulling it down. We must support it and encourage the team to get those the vaccine to South Africa and have South Africans accessing it.
So while we talk about a scramble, I'm going to bring in into the conversation the professor in just a moment, but answer this specific question. While we talk about a scramble to get this vaccine in here, it's all about the rollout plan. Is there a concrete plan in place to roll this out?
I think over the last few days, Dr. Mkhize gave a detailed analysis of what is going to happen, what is the rollout plan, what are they doing. They have a comprehensive team that looks into the plan, and I have confidence in them.
Professor Ndletyana, let's talk to you. You've listened to the chairperson of the African National Congress. He says, we have nothing to worry about, and all the huffing and puffing that South Africans have been involved in the last couple of days are all much ado about nothing because plans are in place. Are you convinced?
Well, I am partly convinced, Toli. Well, obviously, there are money issues. We're not doing well, as you know. We don't have as much money as we would prefer to have. So we cannot quite get what we want at the time that we want it. I think we have to accept that problem. But that aside, though, I think there's a problem of coordination here. For instance, President Ramaphosa a few weeks ago said we would get the vaccine in the second quarter. Well, there was a lot of unhappiness about that, but it was a good indication that things were kind of happening. But then a week later or so, a few days later, Dr. Mkhize then says, we will get this month. So then, which leaves one wondering, why didn't the president make sufficient effort to get these vaccines in January? Why was there a difference of a few days to secure something a lot earlier? That tells you that there's a little bit of disconnect. I'm not sure maybe we do have a plan. Are we pushing that plan hard enough? Because you can't have the president saying we'll get it in April. Then a few days later, Mkhize says, well, by the way, we've managed to convince someone we'll start getting them now. So there's a clear problem there.
Yeah. There you have it, Chairperson of the African National Congress. It would seem that this is, I don't know what word to use, but it's piecemeal. We are trying by all means to try and get this vaccine here. And when something like that happens, we know all too well what the result is going to be, because if things are done without a proper plan in place, we're going to have the exact same situation that we experienced during the procurement of PPE.
You see, we're a very noisy nation. That's how Ndlulamthi scenario plan describes us. That we're noisy. We talk too loud on anything and things that we know and things that we do not know. Now, a president depends on a number of teams that work in various aspects of the work in the country. If at a point the information before the president is that we'll get the first vaccines in April, the president will say so. If the team that is actually hard at work there makes a breakthrough, it will not refuse to divulge that breakthrough because the president made a prior announcement. That's how it works. Dr. Mkhize is leading the team that negotiates all the deals about the vaccines. Now, if he says, no, we've made a breakthrough, we'll get them now before the end of January, that is a breakthrough in a complex process where a number of countries in the world are trying to access those vaccines. And Europe want to buy all of them for themselves because they are resourced.
Chairperson, if I could come in quickly. Today, there are reports that suggest that in a day, government is going to try and vaccinate over 300,000 people using some 6,300 vaccinators that are going to be appointed from somewhere we're not sure. The important thing here is over 300,000 vaccinations to be conducted in a day. Does that for you say, indeed, this plan can be carried through?
You see, Xoli, I put a disclaimer at the beginning. I said it's not my area of speciality. I'm not going to have authority to talk authoritatively on the matter. But if vaccination centers are all over the countries, that's a possibility. You must remember that the whole concept of the vaccine is swimming against a very negative stream of many theories that try to pour cold water on the vaccination. And that should be encouraging us to work harder to ensure that all the centers throughout the country do carry out the plan.
Professor, 300,000 vaccinations, at least these are newspaper reports. We have yet to hear this concretely from the minister. Knowing the state that the ANC constantly talks about, which is a capable state that ought to be built so that it is able to carry out what its mandate is. Are you convinced that this is something that we can indeed do smoothly?
Well, we can, I think, Xoli. For instance, we have a well-developed welfare system. For instance, grants are being issued every month. There is a system and a habit of supplying mass services at a much bigger scale. So this is not something that we haven't done before. There is infrastructure already, but the problem might be fear that people have about infections, commitment of staff. That has been the problem. But in terms of culture of supplying these mass services, that's not something new to us. We do that all the time. right? But we are also doing it at a different time, at a time when people are very scared of their health. And so that will test preparations mainly. It's more about preparations, making sure that the plan is already there. Don't start planning just before you have to supply. You have to plan ahead of time, have trial runs, perhaps, so to speak, but most importantly, make sure that the staff is protected. So if the staff is secured, that they are confident that they will not be infected, they have proper protective gear, I don't think we should battle. But then again, the newness of the situation does not, means that there may be mistakes here and there. But in terms of what we have in place, I think that alone gives some promise. Yeah.
All right, Chairperson, before
you know, Kole, I mean the statistics called recoveries of COVID-19
patients, yes.
I went to a public institution for treatment. When I came out there, I met Dr. Mkiza. I said to them, Dr. Mkiza were doing a disservice to the public health system. Hard-working frontline workers in public health institutions, we normally understate and try to find fault on them. I slept in that hospital for 9 days, and I had a different impression when I came out of there. Were many there. I was not alone, set aside because I'm a minister. Were many. When we entered there, I think we had 102 patients, and that number increased all the time. And I said, we are understating the capacity of the public health system. We always look for negative. That attitude must change.
We are in conversation with the national chairperson of the African National Congress, Gwede Mantashe, and we also have the University of Johannesburg's Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana. Gentlemen, my thanks to you both for staying with us. I want to go on the aggressively restoring the economy and creating jobs, which was part of what the president presented on Friday, Mr. Mantashe. And top of that list, when it comes to economic recovery, is the energy sector, which he said is going to see large-scale public investment. Massive new electricity generation and transmission capacity are going to be built. Question is, when?
Oli, I'm sure you followed what we called a request for information. You followed what we call request for proposals, which is preparatory work for work that is going to be done at energy in terms of supplementing the work of ESCOM, where we are committing ourselves to generate more than 16,000 megawatts outside of ESCOM. Now, that work is out. All the requests are in. We are now selecting companies that will commit to do the work. So that means in the first half of 2021, we are going to see the work. The construction will be on site. And to me, that is not a promise, it's a commitment, because we'll give it to people who commit to do it.
Yet, Chairperson, the country is still energy insecure, and a constant reminder of that is the load shedding we just experienced on Wednesday and Thursday.
Yes. I always, as a student of social science, I always remind people that social science problems are not resolved like natural science problems. You will have to do certain things in a particular way constantly over a period of time, then you get results. The fact that we are now allowing self-generation for self-use, that in itself is a commitment to say, let's not wait for ESCOM to be corrected. That work must continue, but other work must be done. The fact that we allow municipalities to generate their own energy is also an acceptance of that. The fact that we have an emergency procurement, which must take place within the next 6 months and proceed until it is completed, 2,000 megawatts, those are interventions that are directly talking to the problem in energy. So So the point I'm trying to make to you is that there's focus on that work. We're not all over the show.
Professor, we have been sitting with the issue of load shedding. If I'm correct, I think this is the 13th year now, 2021, that we've been sitting with this problem. How does South Africa attract investment into this economy when you have an energy insecure country?
Well, Cody, that's a serious problem because companies need to be assured that there'll always be energy for them to run. I think we've been having a lot of discussions. Yes, Mkwati, in social sciences, quite correctly, things don't happen quick enough. There are processes, people have interests, and they start off disagreeing because they are testing each other out, and it does take time. But I don't think we have the luxury of time. We are in a crisis situation, and we have to admit that we've been talking about this for some time now. We have all sorts of energy sources, solar, wind, gas, but we've just been talking about these things. And also you have parastatals. We have more than 700 parastatals. I don't think that Mkwati even knows some of them. For a country whose economy is doing terribly bad, how do you justify having all these parastatals? They are not adding any value. We had a long debate over SAA, for instance. Mkwati himself said you must close this thing. But Praveen Gordon, for some reason, is fascinated with SAA, wanted to maintain it. So there was a lot of toing and froing on this thing. And in the meantime, government was spending money to maintain an airline that was not adding any value in terms of, it was not breaking even. We constantly had to pay for this airline. And so there's lack of uncertainty over what exactly we want to do. There's this fascination with state-led development. We are still stuck to ideology. I think we need, especially the ANC, they need to start believing exactly what they've been saying, that most of the jobs will be created by the private sector. That's what the ANC has been saying. That's what it has been saying for years now. So once you make that commitment, that once you make that realization, then it follows that you have to create conditions that enable the private sector to do these things. So there's an ideological paralysis of sorts. We kind of believe that there are things that we need to do, but we can't quite bring ourselves into doing them. But at some point, government must appreciate the fact that they are leaders. They must lead. And some of the things that they want to do will inevitably be contentious. There will be resistance to some of these changes. But they must push on. You don't have to engage in all these debates when you are in a crisis. You have to push on and let the chips fall where they may. Because ultimately something has got to be done, and this has to be drastic measures. Inevitably, there will be some unhappiness, but they must stick it out in the hope that on the other side, the economy will start reaping benefits. So the fact that there is an outcry or unhappiness over certain policies does not in and of itself means that you have to abandon the effort to change the economy. Change by its very nature is very uncomfortable. But I think government has a lot of hesitancy. As soon as people start complaining, then they back down. So there's a lack of will and commitment to do what is necessary. For me, that's the problem.
Implementation.
From 2010, there was a discussion of what was called the 2013 Integrated Resource Plan. It was not finalized. I was taken to that portfolio 1.5 years ago. First thing I did was to ensure that that policy is put in place. It is in place. We're implementing it now. Yeah, that was within the 1.5 years that I've been there. That is not criticizing my predecessors. I'm telling you, complex policies, that needs a drive. Number two, you see there is a reconstruction and recovery plan of the economy, which involved all stakeholders in it, like business, labor, community. We produced that plan. And one economist asked me, what is different about this? It doesn't look sustainable. I pointed to him the difference between normal economic recovery plans and that plan. I said, that plan has not put overemphasis on macroeconomic analysis. It put macroeconomic analysis as a preamble, but there's a lot of emphasis of what sectors should do. In that plan, it says, in energy, this is what we should do. In mining, this is what we should do. In tourism, this is what we should do. That, though for economists it doesn't look good enough, I love it because it gives the president space and opportunity to crack his whip on individual ministers who are responsible for those sectors. And that's why on its first implementation, the first 2 quarters last year were a disaster. Quarter 2 was a big disaster. Quarter 3 recovered dramatically. When we had a discussion with economists in the department, they said there is going to be a V-shaped recovery. I said, no, it's going to be a dog leg. It became a V-shape because there were specific things that were done by sectors. That's why the current lockdown worries me a great deal in the sense that it is going to tamper with the efforts of the sectors. Tourism was smashed by the lockdown totally. But on third quarter, it began to show green shoots. And it showed those green shoots because that ministry was tasked to talk to the people in the sector and work together with the private sector. As Professor Ndlejana says, we're not talking to ourselves. In mining, I talk to the mining industry. We're developing an exploration plan together because exploration in mining is the lifeblood of mining. And we accept that and work together and must start investment in that area. Then developing of mines will follow. That's where it is.
I guess what remains here, Chairperson, and it's not something that you're going to answer here today, but it's a bugbear of this ANC government, and that is that implementation is constantly a problem. It's been highlighted by the president. But I want to move on to another
Can I
area.
deal with that issue?
Very briefly.
When we meet and that thing is said by leadership of the ANC, I said, if we continue raising that issue ourselves, to whom are we complaining to? Our responsibility is to ensure that there is execution capacity in the state. It's not to complain that there is no capacity to execute in the state. It is the responsibility of leadership to ensure that the execution. One thing that COVID-19 has helped us to do is to ensure that the bureaucracy, state bureaucracy has been tested to the limit and began to shape differently and begin to do things. Quarter 3 is the early testimony. I'm very busy analyzing quarter 4 already.
Yeah. Let me move on to the issue of the border management fiasco that we saw in December, and we're still seeing it. We're sitting with it now. Who should take the blame for the humanitarian crisis we're experiencing at our borders?
It's the countries involved. Sometimes it is made a South African fiasco. Half the time, the majority of people who are involved in that fiasco are not South Africans. It is the responsibility of the Zimbabwean government, South African government, Mozambican government, South African government. But it is also the responsibility of our government to close borders when others close borders. We should not open borders when they close their borders. If they close their borders, we must close the borders. And that takes hard decisions to be taken. That we're closing our borders will allow a movement in a regulated way. If we do that, but in your news, you see people when you begin to be tough there, they go and swim across the river and they sink. And it's the choice that we're making. What choices are we making when that happens? Border management in South Africa is our responsibility. But in Zimbabwe, it is not our responsibility.
Professor Ndlejana, who should take blame for what is happening at our borders?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure, Tony. But it looks like there was some little bit of poor planning there. Things did not go as they should have. But I think I want to speak on a much broader issue. I think we need to kind of redefine ourselves in a way as an immigrant nation. Uh, we are in a very tough neighborhood with countries that are somewhat dysfunctional, Zimbabwe being the most prominent case. So we'll continue to have people flooding into our borders or through our borders. We cannot stop that, and we are not quite certain when exactly we'll have full stability within this region, within the continent. We're not certain about that, but what we are certain about is that people will continue coming to South Africa because this country offers prospects of a good life. So that the question becomes, how do you utilize the skills?
Yeah.
Because you are getting a lot of people, a lot of good, skilled people. This idea of cringing at foreigners coming in and complaining that there are too many of them, they will continue to come. That's human nature. People look for livelihoods. So stop complaining and think about how do you take advantage of these skills. And once we start imagining ourselves as an immigrant nation, of course, we're a newly liberated country. We're very possessive about our own country. This is our country, Zwelethwe and all that. But the reality of the moment is that we're having a lot of foreigners coming in. How do we harness those skills? Because they offer more skills than we have in the country. So we need to take advantage of that.
We're still in conversation with the ANC chairperson, Gwede Mantashe, and University of Johannesburg's Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana. And we're talking about the issues that have come out of the ANC January 8 statement. But some of the issues, I wonder, Chairperson, whether they were explored hard enough. Because if we stay on the Zimbabwean issue, or should we say the Beitbridge border situation, because that's what we're talking about before we went to a break, this issue of border management. But I want to take a political spin on it now and ask you the question, in respect of what we are seeing at the Beitbridge border, the Zimbabwean situation, is the ANC and the political allies, or its political allies in the SADC region, reaping the fruits of massaging a regime that has turned on its people over a period of 20 years?
We have a responsibility to manage the South African situation. We have neighbors. Others are very friendly. Others are not so friendly, but they are neighbors. The beauty or the unfortunate part, it depends on which angle you see it. About neighbors, you don't change them as you wish. If you have a neighbor, that's your neighbor. They are not going to be removed from your neighborhood because you don't like what they do. That situation is a reality that we must deal with. Sometimes I hear hard criticism on the ANC that you are too soft on Zimbabwe. I don't get much criticism about Botswana, a little bit about Mozambique.
And that is because Zimbabwe has become a problem for the entire SADC region.
Okay. Then if
you agree?
No, so don't ask me ballot questions, Kuli. Please. You see, all I'm saying is that the fact that we must talk to Zimbabwe is a fact for us. We must talk to them. Sometimes they come through in a way that appears very hostile and pose threat. A few days ago they said if we don't talk to a journalist in SABC, they will reveal what our delegation went there to do.
So maybe tell us here, what did you do? What actually did you do at that trip?
I was not part of the trip. I was not part of the trip. I was actually keen to hear what is it.
But you may have been briefed about this.
No.
Trip. What is it that the ZANU-PF is threatening to spill?
No, let them spill it. Actually, if you ask me, ZANU-PF must just spill it if they want to. We engage them because you can't have a neighbor who is always blackmailing you into decisions. It can't be right. From where I'm seated, I think the way we relate with each other as neighbors with ZANU-PF should change. It should be more engaging and more open and more transparent.
So right now it's not. That's your admission.
My admission is that sometimes it is full of blackmail and threats. I don't like that part.
Professor, that's where you come in. Your assessment of what has just been said here, it's a massive admission that actually South Africa has a problem.
Totally. It's not an admission, it's an explanation of the reality we're facing.
That's your wording, Chairperson. Yeah. I'm saying to the professor, my wording is that this is an admission that the ANC is being threatened by ZANU-PF and by extension its government, and therefore that's why it's unable to solve this situation.
Okay.
Well, in Zim, I think we have a very contemptuous leadership. I think they think the ANC are just junior people. They don't take them seriously. So there's the same kind of disrespect they have for their own population. They are projecting that to the ANC as well, to our own government. And I obviously don't know what the ANC says, to them. But I think we need to act in a way that recognizes the gravity of the problem, that their problems are becoming our problems. And so whatever happens in Zim, we must have a lot of interest in. We must try to nudge them, if not nudge them, talk tough. I don't know, Mkwati, why you would accept, people talking to you contemptuously when you have valid concerns, because their problems are beginning to interfere with South African issues. And so, from where I sit, I would expect that South Africa would start talking a little bit tough. After all, we are a government that I imagine does provide some support to Zim, right? So this thing of accepting being treated contemptuously, I'm kind of amazed by it, unless, of course, we think that we deserve that kind of treatment.
Professor, can I just quickly come in here? He makes a point that maybe it's time that the ANC started talking tough on Zimbabwe. And I want to second that because the ANC has been
you are
quiet.
Voting now.
Chairperson, listen to me please carefully. I would like to find out from you why it is that you have not spoken out on such a serious question where a journalist, for the third time in 6 months, Hopewell Chinono has been thrown in jail for what we don't know. In Zimbabwe. Okay. One of the worst prisons in Zimbabwe.
Okay, in Zimbabwe.
Here's a question, Chairperson. Why is it that the ANC is not speaking out on human rights abuses in Zimbabwe when we are a country that is steeped in human rights?
You know, Kole, at one point, both the US and UK tried to impose on us the responsibility to go to Zimbabwe militarily. We had to explain to them that, to them, the crisis in Zimbabwe is a research project. To us, it's a reality that we confront every day. When that crisis deepens in Zimbabwe, we don't research it, we meet it in the streets of Johannesburg. That's what happens. That's the difference between a neighbor and just ordinary relations. Zimbabwe is our neighbor. The difficult customer to deal with, I can tell you that. But I don't think the solution is on doing what they do to us and we blackmail them. We should not do that. Because one person who taught me, Comrade Khalima, taught me one thing, said, you see, Mkulua, when you deliver a post and the dog comes out to bite you, don't go on your knees and bite it, because people won't see the difference. Stand on and try to beat it away. And I don't think we should say, because Zimbabwe is rough on us, sometimes it blackmails us, we should blackmail them and be rough and insult them.
So when are you going to start talking tough on Zimbabwe?
What is tough? I don't know tough. Tough and rude are two different things. Okay, it's not the same. Tough You know, when I was Secretary General, we developed a paper which we gave to everybody in the region about something called, we're analyzing the question of regime change and the risk of accidental leadership. They asked us, what does that mean? We said to them, we won't know it because President Mugabe is still around. When he's not there, you will feel symptoms of that. And I think by now, the debate will be different.
Chairperson, unfortunately, you know, time is against us, and I would like the two of you to very quickly weigh in on one particular point, moving away from the Zimbabwean situation now. One particular point that came out of the speech of the president, where he was talking about a capable and ethical state that the South African government is trying to build, or rather the ANC is trying to build. And he underlined this point, that it is a commitment to managing our country's economy and public finances in a sustainable manner so that we can retain our country's sovereignty and ability to shape our own destiny. A simple question to you, please, very, very briefly. I'm out of time. Is South Africa's sovereignty under threat as a result of the plundering that we have seen in government?
You like using big words to exaggerate situations. South African sovereignty is not under threat.
Why would the president feel it necessary to mention this?
Let me explain to you. You see, you asked me a question, I'm trying to answer you. I'm trying to be as gentle as I can in answering that question. You see, there are problems that I must accept upfront. There are challenges, but one of the issues we are discussing is this thing of having short-term contracts for, say, for example, teachers, helping the state? Is it helping the state? Or is it having a high turnover at the apex of the state and therefore not giving the state enough time to develop that capacity? When a DG is beginning to settle and understand the issues, we chase him up and bring new. I think there are quite a number of things that we must look into, because capability of the state include many things. One of the issues that you have ignored is that why do we call this is the year of Charlotte Manyamatlake? It's a commitment to invest in the role of women in society, and that includes the state. And the more we do that, the better it is. You know, mining used to prohibit women, but today it is accepting that they are better than men in areas that need precision.
Chairperson, unfortunately, your time is up. Prof, very briefly, your thoughts on the words of the president there?
Well, I think you also need politicians to act professionally. The professionalism does not just apply to bureaucrats. Politicians need to make sure that when they come in, they continue old programs. They don't just change programs simply because they happen to be there.
I agree.
They have to appreciate that policies take a while to bear fruits. So it doesn't help trying to do something quickly. And they have to read programs of their own ministry properly. So you need ministers of good caliber. Not many of them are good in that cabinet. They are fascinated with their own positions, but are not strongly clued up about what they need to do. And this has been a problem. You know, a lot of ministers that are insecure, that treat their DGs badly, that lack professionalism. So if you need a good performing bureaucracy, you need to have good ministers as well, not just bureaucrats.
Professor Mcebisi Ndletyana, thank you very much for your time, Professor at the University of
and good journalists. Yeah.
Indeed. And the National Chairperson of the African National Congress, Gwede Mantashe, thanks indeed for making the time to speak to us.